side of the desk. We're going to talk about the newspapers now on the programme. Alison Sargent's with us, and you're starting in South Africa, aren't you? The reactions to the travel bans targeting the country after, of course, this terrible discovery of the Omicron coronavirus variant. Alison.
Yeah, there's lots of frustration in the South African press over these travel bans. The paper Business Day notes on their front page that President Cyril Ramaphosa has criticized these bans as unscientific, and the newspaper agrees with the president. In its editorial, Business Day writes that this is about politics, not science. They point out that while the variant has already been detected in Europe, the UK's ban still only targets African nations, and they lament the fact that it exposes South Africa once again to stigmatization, all because the scientists actually did such a good job monitoring the virus. According to Business Day, South Africa's genome sequencing capabilities are turning out to be a curse for the country. A similar tone today in the Sowetan's editorial. They call the travel bans ignorant, knee-jerk decisions. As we read here on the paper's front page, South Africa is now considering making vaccines mandatory. The Sowetan not really behind that idea, but still the paper writes that South Africa really can't afford to see any more lockdowns.
You found some pieces as well, haven't you, saying that it's wealthy countries that are to blame for this new variant. They hoarded the vaccines, allowed that virus to spread and mutate.
Yeah, French paper Lumanite is headlining on the irresponsibility of rich countries. They write that the Omicron variant proves that vaccine access for all is a global emergency. The paper writes that wealthy countries are trying to barricade themselves, but the virus, quote, won't just drown in indifference in the Channel or in the Mediterranean. An allusion there by Lumanite to another crisis that many say is also being mismanaged by European countries. Lumanite here calls for vaccine patents to be waived and for wealthy countries to step up and help poorer countries. Now, the idea that no one is safe until everyone is safe is also illustrated in a cartoon in the Washington Post today. This is by Ann Telnis. Now, normally these doomsday signs say the end is near. In the case of the pandemic, though, the end is not near until poorer nations get the vaccine.
And one more story for us on the topic of the Omicron variant. The website Slate explains that it technically should actually have a different name.
Yeah, now unless you know the Greek alphabet, Stuart, you probably wouldn't have noticed that the WHO actually skipped over 2 letters to get to Omicron. The first in line should have actually been new, spelled N-U, but the new variant sounds confusing for the obvious reason that it's too similar to the word new. The next in line should have been Xi, spelled X-I, just like the Chinese president's last name. Now that, as you can imagine, also causes some problems. Slate explains that a lot of right-wing pundits in the U.S. saw skipping Xi as sort of a move to cater to the Chinese Communist Party, but Xi is actually a very common last name in China. It's not just Xi Jinping, and the WHO explained that using that letter would violate their guidelines not to cause offense or stigma to any cultural or ethnic groups.
It's lucky there's no world leader called Omicron then, isn't there? And of course, it was vaccine mandates that really sparked the current crisis in France's overseas territories. This is Guadeloupe and Martinique. Papers are also focusing on the government's attempts to calm the tension there, aren't they?
Yeah, France's overseas minister is currently visiting the territories. According to the local paper France Antilles Guadeloupe, it's an outstretched hand, but a firm hand that's being offered by the French government. The paper points out that Sébastien Lecornu, who we see there, started off his visit in Guadeloupe with a tribute to police forces. Now, the protests in Guadeloupe and Martinique started off over mandatory vaccines for healthcare workers, but as we read in Libération, there are multiple reasons for this crisis. The paper points out that the French government has made some concessions, like recognizing that high rates of prostate cancer in the territories was caused by exposure to the pesticide chlordecone, which was used highly in French plantations. Overall, though, Libération writes that the French government seems to be approaching this crisis without any sort of real strategy. Notably, they're confused by France's overseas minister suggesting suggesting that Martinique and Guadeloupe could become autonomous. The Figaro is pointing out that no one there is actually asking for more autonomy. Both the papers say that this proposal seems pretty off topic. The Figaro actually suspects that proposing autonomy is a trick to force local leaders into assuming more responsibility.
And finally, from Alison, coronavirus lockdowns have mostly ruined the idea of being trapped in one place. But this last story really reminds us that being cooped up can sometimes actually be fun, can't it?
This story actually sounds like a setup for a romantic comedy, Stuart. A snowstorm in the UK has left dozens of people stranded for 3 nights in a remote pub in Yorkshire.
What a shame.
The New York Times, I know, right? To be stranded in a pub. Too bad we're not there now, Stuart.
Yeah, exactly.
The New York Times explains that they gathered actually on Friday to listen to an Oasis tribute band, but they've all been stuck there since then. They're hoping to get out this Monday afternoon. To pass the time, they've been doing pub quizzes and watching movies like Grease and Mamma Mia, doing a lot of karaoke, mostly to Oasis songs. I have to say, it sounds like a pretty good time.
Let's not look back in anger. Alison, did you get that reference?
I did get that one.
You did
You're my Wonderwall, Stuart.
Oh, you dreamt up in 2 seconds. Very sharp this morning, Alison Sargent. Thanks, Alison. Alison with the papers on For Us 24.